Okay, so as I said, Darcia Narvaez is not with us, but she will be through her PowerPoint in which she's talking. So we will listen to her. It's not only pictures. And she might, I don't know how it will technically possible, she might join us at the end of the PowerPoint, which, poor one, will be 3 o'clock in the morning for her. So in case we can manage that, we will be really grateful to her. Darcia Narvaez is a professor of psychology at the University of Notre Dame. And where is that? Indiana, United States. She wrote, it's not in Paris. We have only half of ours, but that's a church. She wrote lots of articles and books. And one of the apparently famous ones was written in 2015, and it's called Neurobiology and the Development of Human Morality, with the subtitle Evolution, Culture, and Wisdom. That's why I was talking about doing the splits this morning. She is highly interested in real bond, education, moral teaching moral, in order to try to change our world today. And what I read is that she traveled a lot and made researches in lots of countries before going back to the States, where she realizes how kids are raised. And she was really shocked. So she puts all her energy with a lot of other researchers on how to teach again soft bonding, presence, nutrition, care, tenderness, respect, and all of that, with a purpose, which is a huge one, to try to help humanity to change. The last article I could read on internet is also an important title, Getting Back on Track to Being Human. That's a good program, right? So I'm sorry she's not here. Darcia Narvaez.
Hello, my name is Darcia Narvaez, and I'm sorry I could not be with you in person, but I'm recording this presentation so that I can talk to you about companionship and connection, repairing the cycle of life for a thriving world. I worry about humanity and the planet. I suppose that you might also be worried. Why is humanity in such a big mess? Humans are destroying their habitat. There is climate instability, melting of the ice caps and glaciers, massive ecological disruption from human activity virtually everywhere in the world. Earth's systems are breaking down. There is massive poisoning of soil, air, water, animal bodies, and visible wildlife, including insects, has decreased by 50% in the last 40 years. Humanity's well-being, especially in the United States, is on the decline. Now you might say, why are you talking about the United States? Well, it turns out that many of the problems that the United States has, the United States exports to everyone else. And so whatever is happening in the United States should worry us that it will happen around the world too. In the United States, mental illness, violence, drug addiction, and suicide are rising, while lifespan is shrinking. People under age 50 are at a health disadvantage compared to everyone in the other advanced nations. Child well-being ranks near the bottom of advanced nations. These are bad signs for the planet and for humanity. What has gone wrong? How do we solve this problem? I study the question from many angles, but believe that the problem starts in early life. But where do we begin our analysis? We need to establish baselines for our species. The human species has been around for about 6 million years. You can see here, depending on where you want to start our history, 6 million years ago, 1 million years ago, 100,000 years ago. We have been here for quite a long time. But it's hard to take in that long, long history, so let's just look at more recent history. We have been in civilizations only for about 1% of our human genus existence. That's about the last 10,000 years. Before that, we can call that time period our 99%. When we look at our 99%, and what kind of practices we, in those conditions, took up, we can understand then how, when those practices are missing, things might go wrong. I will explain. First, let me say that every animal has a nest. This nest evolved to match up with the maturational schedule of the young. Humans have a nest too. And what do we know about nests? Well, we know that they provide an evolved, expected support system, or what we might call a species-typical developmental system. And we know that when that is provided, you end up with a smart, effective creature, which is a species-typical outcome. What does humanity's evolved nest look like? Well, it's a set of practices that are really 30 to 40 million years old. They come from the social mammal line, which emerged about that long ago. These are practices the community provisions or provides. This list is also called the hunter-gatherer childhood model, because anthropologists noted that hunter-gatherers all over the world provide these kinds of experiences to their young children. And small band hunter-gatherers are the kind of society in which we as a human species spent 99% of our history. And so it's important to look at what are the practices that our species expects, and what are the outcomes from these practices? Do they really matter? I will read through the list now, but then repeat them with a little more information in a moment. So the first is responsivity, or responsiveness to the needs of the child. And this means to keep the baby calm while the brain is rapidly finishing itself, because it's growing so fast in the first 2 years, 3 years, it needs to have a very calm environment to grow properly. Number 2 is touch, and this is pretty constant touch for a baby, being held or slept with a baby, always near a person, because that also helps the baby grow well. Breastfeeding. Breast milk, we'll notice in a moment, is filled with the nutrients and the building blocks of a healthy body and brain. And our species expects it very frequently because it's a thin kind of milk, not a thick kind of milk. And it washes the brain and body with the right kinds of hormones for development. And usually it lasts for about 4 years of life. And it's not a surprise because the immune system takes that long to grow, and breast milk has all the building blocks. Number 4, soothing perinatal experiences during gestation and during birth and after birth. These experiences should be soothing and not stressful or traumatic, because there are long-term effects otherwise. Number 5 is play, and this is self-directed free play in the natural world, outdoors, with multiple age playmates. Also, alloparents, number 6, these are other mothers who care for the baby, are right there with the mother, and help her in ways of being responsive, of touch, play, kinds of things that help keep the child calm and happy while the brain is growing rapidly. And number 7, positive social climate for both mother and child, and feeling like you belong. So let's look at these a little bit more detail. Why do we need the evolved nest? Let's just review that first. At birth, we have only 25% of adult brain volume, and it grows very rapidly. By age 3, 80%. We are also born 9 to 18 months early compared to other animals. We look and act like fetuses, so there's much that develops after birth. And the right brain development, the right hemisphere, is dominant before age 2 and is very significantly involved in all sorts of capacities that, if the care is not good, that brain does not develop well. Because we are so immature at birth, we really need an external womb for 18 months, an exterogestation. During this time period and in the first years of life, there is a biosocial construction of our emotions and cognitions together. They're intertwined in the brain. Our sense of self, our social worldview are also developed during this time period. And there's a constant interaction between nature and nurture. You cannot separate them because every minute the baby is a different baby, and the experiences change the brain. So there's epigenetic effects, meaning genes are being turned on or off during early experience especially, and the baby is expecting to be plastically molded to fit into the community. Now let's return to those 7 aspects of the nest. First is responsiveness. This is the reciprocal communication that happens between usually mother and child, the caregiver and child, synchronizing their communications or emotions, cognitions, repairing the dysynchrony when that occurs, mutually influencing each other in story building and habits and playfulness. And the mother or the caregiver is meeting the child's needs in the moment. That's part of being responsive. And this then establishes the brain wiring, emotional regulation, various patterns of habit that develop, and turns on genes that control anxiety for life. One example of a physiological effect that responsiveness has on the child is the development of the vagus nerve. It's the 10th cranial nerve, which connects to all major body systems: cardiac, respiratory, immune, emotional, and digestive. Poor vagal tone, which is the functioning of the vagus nerve, results from non-responsive parenting in early life, whereas good vagal tone is related to various good things like capacity for intimacy, compassionate response. Physical touch and affection is needed by mammals, all mammals, to grow and synthesize DNA, and separating a mammal baby from the mother dysregulates multiple systems as they're trying to learn to coordinate themselves outside the womb. Separation from mother causes lifelong changes in stress responsivity and can cause impulsive, violent, and antisocial behavior, and even depressive disorders later in life. Touch and affection promote healthy sleep cycles, adaptive behavior arousal, exploratory activities, social and cognitive functioning, and calming. I don't know about where you come from, if this is true, but in the United States, many people think that breast milk and breastfeeding is not that important. Turns out that is incorrect. There are all sorts of benefits, as I mentioned earlier, about breast milk, including higher IQ, executive function skills that persist into adulthood. All sorts of wonderful things are provided by breast milk, such as oligosaccharides, the sugars that provide an antimicrobial and antibiofilm. Observational studies show that breastfed babies actually grow more cognitively, and they have better behavioral control, have larger brains, and they have higher myelination of white matter, meaning that their brain can communicate much more quickly. Soothing perinatal experiences include a calm, welcoming environment during gestation, during birth, and after birth. These periods should follow the natural rhythms of the mother and child, and there should be avoidance of interfering with the timing of birth, using drugs at birth, separating mom and baby after birth, and inducing any painful procedures after birth. These have known effects of disrupting mother and infant entrainment physiologically and psychologically, affecting mother-child bonding, breastfeeding success, and later for the child, emotional and social development. Self-directed free play is the next component of the nest. It facilitates emotion regulation development, gene expression profiles of all kinds, fosters brain development, helps a child with aggression and learn how to control and be social, helps them with leadership skills, helps them focus. All sorts of good things come from free play. And it turns out that adults, when they are involved in free play, they can grow their own brains again. As I mentioned, the right hemisphere's development is dominant in the early years of life, but play can regrow it later in adulthood. And its capacities, the right hemisphere in early life is dominant in self-regulation, the sense of intersubjectivity with others, social pleasure, emotional intelligence, empathy, a sense of being present, self-transcendent, being able to access higher consciousness and higher sense of self, connecting with the peak experiences, for example. The next is maternal support and allo parents, or allo mothers, other mothers. We evolved as a species to raise children in a community of allo parents. Mothers need lots of support to care well for their children. And when they perceive that they have social support, then we find that children's social skills are better and their behavior problems are fewer. And in kindergarten, in the primary school, maternal support is related to how teachers viewed the children and how competent they thought they were. So there's lots of benefits to social support, including keeping moms happy. I understand there's a recent study of parents versus non-parents around the world, and they asked how happy they were. It turned out that virtually everywhere, the non-parents were happier than the parents, except in a couple places, including Portugal. In Portugal, the parents were happier. And when they looked into it, it turns out that Portugal has allo parents. There's extended family and support of parenting and mothering. And so it really is significant in the life of a child, but also in society. The last component of the nest is positive social climate. This means that the child experiences more positive than negative emotions when they're with family members and community members. So there's more joy, more serenity, and sense of expansiveness, less sadness, anger, fear, or humiliation. In our work, we find that adults who report more of these positive emotions in childhood are, as adults, more securely attached, mentally healthier, less distressed, and less likely to have a self-protective moral orientation, bracing against others. So in a positive social climate, the individual feels loved, cherished, and appreciated. And they are able to create positive reactions in others and foster deep friendships. We can step back and look at the big picture now. So number one here in this diagram is companionship caregiving, what I have been describing. And when you provide that kind of companionship care to a child, they develop a good physio-neurosocial biology. And when they develop further as into adulthood, they show well-being and they can develop wisdom because everything was set up properly in the beginning. And these adults with well-being and wisdom foster communities. Number 4, communities that attend to the basic needs of their community members, especially children. And so this is the kind of cycle of cooperative companionship that is part of our heritage. This is what you see that we can identify in these small band hunter-gatherers, the communities that represent 99% of our history. If we think about the individual then in this society, this companionship kind of society, their brains work quite well. And this is a kind of picture of one way the brain works well. You see the 3 boxes. The first one, Proto Reptilian, is the one we're born with. We're born with these survival systems, these emotion systems of anger, fear, panic, lust, which is, they are all integrated with fight, flight, freeze, and faint, the stress response, the major stress response. And if we're raised well, we spend most of our early childhood in the mammalian, the second box there. We develop our sense of care for others in social relationships. We play, and we develop a heart-centered imagination. And as we grow, we're able to go to the third box more. Our executive functions, our higher order thinking, our ability to think outside the present moment, which interacts then with these earlier systems, the mammalian and proto reptilian. In a good brain, the executive functions are able to control those proto reptilian reactions. So if you get scared, all of a sudden a bear comes in the room and you try to hide, or you think it's a bear, but it turns out it's not a bear, it's just a shadow, you are able to calm down rather quickly. And you can go back to spending most of your time in this heart-centered imagination. And that's what we see in these societies that provide the nest. If we think about the individual then in this society, this companionship kind of society, their brains work quite well. And this is a kind of picture of one way the brain works well. You see the 3 boxes. The first one, Proto Reptilian, is the one we're born with. We're born with these survival systems, these emotion systems of anger, fear, panic, lust, which is, they are all integrated with fight, flight, freeze, and faint, the stress response, the major stress response. And if we're raised well, we spend most of our early childhood in the mammalian, the second box there. We develop our sense of care for others in social relationships. We play, and we develop a heart-centered imagination. And as we grow, we're able to go into the third box more. Our executive functions, our higher order thinking, our ability to think outside the present moment, which interacts then with these earlier systems, the mammalian and proto reptilian. In a good brain, the executive functions are able to control those proto reptilian reactions. So if you get scared, all of a sudden a bear comes in the room and you try to hide, or you think it's a bear, but it turns out it's not a bear, it's just a shadow, you are able to calm down rather quickly. And you can go back to spending most of your time in this heart-centered imagination. And that's what we see in these societies that provide the nest. When we think of social relationships and moral relationships, how we treat others, in these societies, we develop these 2 ways of being, what I call the engagement ethic, this ability to be relationally attuned to others in the moment. You can resonate with the other. You feel an egalitarian regard for the other. You respect them in an I-thou manner. And these are, or this, the engagement method is primed and developed by these kinds of supportive, caring relationships that the nest and companionship care provides. And you end up with secure attachment. Communal imagination is the abstract thinking capacities that build on top of the engagement ethic, and that then leads to a sense of ethics for egalitarianism, for love, resident responsibility, sympathetic action. What happens when you move away from societies who provide this kind of care in early life? Lots of touching and caring and affection. To societies who treat their children this way: isolation, aloneness, not much affection, detachment. In other words, what happens when the nest is degraded? Well, you're going to have the support lacking. The evolved expected support is not provided, which is going to be a species atypical developmental system. And so the outcome on the right is going to be outside the evolved range of intelligence and effectiveness. A species atypical outcome. So we should not be surprised that people who do not experience the nest are going to be kind of not as smart, not as cooperative, not as tuned into others as those who do receive the nest. What happens when the nest is missing? Or even worse, when there's abuse? Well, undercare, which is the missing nest, is toxic. It's going to lead to deficiencies in brain structure, the integrity of brain structure, hormonal regulation, such as oxytocin, the systems integration, that all are important for social capacities, our sociality. The United States has epidemics of anxiety and depression among all age groups, suggesting widespread deficiencies.
The normal sound will come back in 1 minute.
It has. Most children do not get what they need in most of the areas that have been mentioned as part of the nest. So undercare in early life leads to various poor outcomes. Insecure attachment, which is increasing in the United States. Poor social relations, which you can see from your newspapers, is increasing in the United States. Poor behavior regulation. Stress reactivity. All these things are happening in the United States now. Lower empathy and an impairment of thinking and feeling. What happens to a baby psychologically when needs are ignored? They're going to be distrustful of others. They're going to feel anxious, socially anxious. Perhaps then build cynicism into their worldview. They won't trust themselves with their own body. They won't trust their feelings. They won't trust the world in general. And they will feel alienated and not really want to live with others, but apart, detached. They'll be socially disagreeable, oppositional, aggressive, or withdrawing. And they have a very deep impaired development of the self. Because the neurobiology has not been set up properly, There will be problems at every level. Chronic dysregulation of behavior, but just basic inflammation in the system. So there'll be the foundations laid for further psychopathologies and later mental illness and a propensity for violence. Remember this picture of the brain's functioning, the kind of global mindsets we can get into. You can see here, this is the well-functioning brain. Notice what happens with a poorly functioning brain, one that's been stressed toxically in early life. It's going to lead to a disposition of self-protection. These survival systems will be enhanced. Anger, fear, panic, fight, flight, freeze, faint. And those, because the proper brain development did not occur, when they get activated, they take over the higher order brain systems, the executive functions and neocortex. They flood the brain. You see red, you're so upset, and it takes so much time to calm down because those control systems were not developed properly. And then you see that there's no mammalian care and play. These aspects will be underdeveloped because the child has been focused on survival. And so what's supposed to have been growing doesn't grow. So what does a poorly developed brain use for relating to others? They will be oriented to self-protectionism. So they're based in those survival systems that we share with all animals. They're available at birth. And they're useful in moments of physical threat. If an actual bear came in the room, yes, you'd want to hide and run and protect yourself, assuming it's an angry bear. But if you're chronically feeling this way, it's very detrimental to your health and to your social relationships. And people who have poor early experience are going to be easily primed to be afraid or angry. They will see threat everywhere, and they will be more likely to go into self-protectionism. And when you go into that mindset, it takes over your attention. It depletes your resources for higher order processes, the blood flow shifts, and it shifts attention to the self, of course, because you're about protecting yourself, and lowers empathy for others. It mobilizes the individual for protective action. There are at least two subtypes of self-protectionism. One is oppositionalism, that's angry, aggressive orientation, based in the activated sympathetic system. For criminals, often it feels really good and right to punch somebody who bumped them. Aggressive kids feel like people do things on purpose to make them mad, and so it feels good to react and mitigate justice that way. And so you have a self-preservational externalizing going on, and this could be a habitual personality disposition. The second basic kind of self-protectionism is withdrawal, where you freeze or dissociate, fly away from the moment emotionally. And these are based in the systems that protect the body from death or psychological trauma. So if a baby was left to cry extensively and never responded to, and they had to fall asleep by themselves because from exhaustion, to stay alive, they stopped making noise, they learned this system well. And so it leads to a sense of submission or passivity or detachment from life, and easy compliance with an authority. The Nazi child-raising manuals suggested that you really wanted to break the spirit of a child in early life in the first 3 years, because they wouldn't remember it, but they would be very compliant with authority, because you have made them so afraid that they went into these detached, dissociative flight orientations. So it represents a kind of self-preservation or internalizing, and can become dispositional. When these basic face-to-face orientations of oppositionalism and withdrawal are added to by abstract thinking, they then also can be harmful to others. They hijack the imagination. So if you're feeling angry about something and you want to dominate others, you're going to have a righteous imagination fueled by that aggressive need for control. And you're very unegalitarian in that moment, and you want to scapegoat others, practice eliminating those who are evil or bad or just not doing things right. If you've practiced that detachment from emotion, you may go into a detached imagination where you spend your time on your intellect, not connected to your emotions. And many children learn to do this because their emotions were ignored in childhood. And many of us professors have this kind of orientation, which is a lack of attuned relationship to people with who you're with, being rather cold or cool, categorizing and stereotyping, always evaluating others, objectifying and dissecting and ordering things, decontextualizing things, seeking control, firm answers, calculating utility, and developing things without a sense of consequence. We enhance these capacities in our school system in the United States. When companionship caregiving is missing, there are going to be problems all the way up. The neurobiology doesn't work well, adults become ill and unwise. They create communities that don't attend basic needs. And then this fosters a cycle. The cycle becomes one of competitive detachment. With undercare, the developmentally inappropriate child rearing, there'll be poor development of biopsychosocial neurobiology in the individual, and that individual will become an adult with ill-being and limited social moral capacities, and that adult will create a culture of adults who are distracted, overwhelmed, or over-controlling, and they will perpetuate this cycle. Right now, this is what's happening in the United States, in my view. What can we do to repair ourselves and others? We can see what successful societies have done. For example, the Kun have been around for over 150,000 years. They are a sustainable society. They play, heal, trance dance, and connect to nature. I've developed what I call developmental, ethical, ecological practice. It's developmental because it's oriented to growing. It's ethical because it's broad and has to do with how we live our lives well. And it's ecological because it's about also connecting to the earth and living responsibly with the earth. Here are a few ideas from deep developmental, ethical, ecological practice. First, self-mending. We can heal ourselves by taking up a purposeful self-authorship where we actually make decisions about how to grow and guide ourselves using an expertise developmental approach. We can do this in various ways, depending on what we think we need, so we have to do some self-evaluating. And then find mentors and find ways and practices and habits to build. Second, most of us need to learn, at least in the United States, learn to self-calm. And that means using meditation, deep breathing, and other forms of being in your body that help you feel calm. I practice with my students belly breathing and visualization, imagining self here or there, or in front of this person or that person, and being able to learn to recognize the signals of reaction that you have. And third, here we have slow down, revamp, and reframe. So when you do have a reaction, negative reaction to something, slow it down and see what the source is, revamp what your reaction is, reframe it in a way that helps you grow and not be stuck in that conditioned response. Sometimes we have to pull ourselves out of the present moment and say, what does this matter 500 years from now? And then that helps us revamp our reaction. Ways to self-mend can be with therapy, and ways that reactivate the right brain, the right hemisphere. As I mentioned earlier, playing with young children especially, because they're so free and able to be in the moment, usually. Playing with them is a way for you to grow your right brain. Dan Siegel suggests other ways, such as taking up art or music or anything that helps keep you in the present moment, so your brain actually has to respond in the present moment to what's happening. Individuals can help themselves learn to foster the engagement ethic by how they practice with others, how they think about relationships. They can keep those bonding hormones active with affectionate touch. Having a pet, a dog or cat, can help as well. And I think this is easier for societies that allow you to touch each other. Hispanic societies tend to have that option. And finally, it's important to realize that epigenetics is ongoing. Every time you change your action, different genes are turned on or off. And so you can actually create new gene expression by the behaviors and habits you develop. So that's something to keep in mind, that we are plastic to some degree as adults, and that there's a lot of hope that we can become more tuned, more calm, more tuned into others. Sometimes when we've been in a poorly nurturing environment as young children, we don't develop a social self very much. And again, that's happening in the United States. And so people have to learn to be social, to connect with others, to actually enjoy being with others instead of wanting to be separated from them down the hall or in a different room. And to practice presence with the others, to actually be in the moment with that other person, not be thinking about the future or the past or some other event. And that takes practice. And then to monitor moral mindsets. Are you becoming, for example, are you getting into a domineering, finite mindset or feeling superior to that other person? Well, try to calm yourself down. What's the trigger? What happened to make you feel that way? And try to get back to the present moment, feeling attuned to the other and starting that relational, interpersonal dance, a unique dance each time you meet someone, and see if you can learn to practice the dance with the other. So the balanced, centered self does not feel superior or inferior to the other. And this diagram shows that circle in the center is the balanced self. But it's very easy, and every moment, every day, you can go through these cycles of suddenly feeling superior, going to the right there, feeling, I don't have to be in this relationship. And in order to get back to the balance, you're going to have to feel some pain. You have to let go of that I-ego that just cocked his head up, and come back to the realization that you need others, embracing your humanity with humility. Or you can go in the other direction, where you disown yourself. You become withdrawn and feel inferior. You're not going to speak up. You're compliant. And there again, you have to feel some pain to realize that you have to accept yourself and the responsibility on that left side and come back to accepting your beauty and strength and giving it to the community. So this is a cycle I think we all go through in different ways. And we have to be aware of it, because it's hard to be aware of initially, and then realize that we can get back to staying mostly in that balanced, centered self. The third aspect of what we can do to heal ourselves, and especially in relation to the earth, is to foster common self wisdom, which involves nurturing ecological attachment and a sense of a common self mindset. So that's where we feel connected to nature. And that nature is full of living agents. It's all alive, a community of beings. And that we are all connected through a web of life. We can read and practice our understandings of how we're all part of the tree of life. For example, humans share DNA, our genetics, with much of it with one another. But notice this list, that 50% of your genes or your DNA are shared with bananas, 25% with rice. So remember, the next time you're eating those things, that you're eating your cousins. So when we expand our imaginations now to understand how we're all part of the earth, and the earth has evolved as a community in many ways, it can help us then treat the earth much better. So as we remedy our imagination, instead of thinking, oh, we are the best species, we are superior, and we can control everything else, which is not working, we need to think about how we are connected. We can shift our consciousness and understand our heritages. So that includes the evolved nest and the engagement ethic, the kinds of communal imagination, that more attuned way of being that is part of our heritage that we often lose in industrial nations. And that really we are naturally cooperative, that we're meant to be if we're raised well. And that we're meant to have that communal imagination that includes the natural world. And so we can build our receptive intelligence in various ways, try to tune into the natural world and its signals in various ways. In brief, looking at the brain systems that I mentioned earlier, we can learn then self-calming so that the survival systems don't take over our actions. We can learn to experience social joy if we've missed that. And we can build our communal and ecological imagination so that we are respectfully caring towards the natural world in various ways. And this is a way then we retune and recapture our human capacities for virtue. Because virtue is about living a good life, and in our ancestral condition, that included living well with the earth and not being disrespectful and destructive. Finally, there's various ways to return to our heritage of cooperative, connected companionship. We can intervene at any of these points. Intergenerationally, we can provide for basic needs, number one. Number two, to build a child's good physio-neurosocial biology, we can provide the nest, inside and outside the home. And number 3, we can help adults balance and heal and grow so that they can tune into wisdom and increase their well-being. And finally, we can build narratives and institutions that emphasize connection, nature connection, connection to one another, and our responsibilities to both. These are some of the books that I have written or edited about these topics. The one on the right is the one that has most similar kind of information, neurobiology and the development of human morality. And you can see the name of the publisher there. And there's a discount code if you want to order that book. If I were there, I would be handing out flyers to those who wanted them. For more information, please contact me. There's my email address. There's a web page with lots of papers you can download. I also write a blog for Psychology Today, and I write a lot about these things there. And that blog is called Moral Landscapes. Thank you for your kind attention.
And first, maybe can we say hello to her, because she's on the phone. Oh, hello, Darcia.